Hello there, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on politics in Africa and Arabia. According to a media report, Morocco plays a bigger role in the EU corruption scandal than previously known. The Moroccan Foreign Intelligence Service, DGED, was involved at the highest level in influencing MEPs. That's what the German magazine Spiegel reported, citing investigation documents. According to this, the DGED had already recruited former MEP Pier Antonio Panzeri, his assistant Francesco Giorgi, and MEP Andrea Cozzoloni in 2019. The aim was to influence the Social Democratic group in the European Parliament. According to the report, the current Moroccan ambassador to Poland was responsible for guiding the three men. According to the magazine Spiegel, he is said to have given the suspects envelopes full of cash. The three Italians also had direct contact with the Director General of the DGED Secret Service. The Belgian judiciary is investigating suspects the corruption, money laundering, and influence from abroad in the vicinity of the EU Parliament. It is said that the Gulf Emirate of Qatar is said to have tried to influence political decisions with gifts of money and goods, but Morocco is said to have tried to do the same. Panzeri, Giorgi, and his partner Eva Kaili, a disposed vice president of the European Parliament, are currently in custody with another suspect. Cozzoli recently emphasized that he had no connection to the investigation. Suspected Islamist extremists attacked a police checkpoint in Ismailia in Egypt and killing 3 officers. Another person died in the attack in the city on the Suez Canal, the authorities said. No one initially claimed responsibility for the attack. Egypt has been fighting an offshoot of the Islamic State terrorist group in the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula for years. According to the United Nations, the civilian population in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo is suffering more and more from the rebels of the M23 group. Murders, kidnappings, torture, and rapes have been reported from the region, according to a United Nations report that was published last week. Among the fatalities are women and children. According to the UN experts, the M23 rebels are also recruiting child soldiers. The experts, who compiled their findings in a 21-page report, based their statements on interviews with more than 230 people and visits to the Rutshuru region in the Congolese province of North Kivu. There, the M23 rebels have seized territory from the central government. The conflict in eastern Congo has been smoldering for decades. More than 120 armed groups are involved in the fighting in the region. Most revolve around land and mine control, while some groups seek to protect their communities. The already unstable situation deteriorated significantly that year with the reappearance of the M23. The rebel group conquered Goma, the largest city in eastern Congo, 10 years ago, but was then inactive for many years. The group's name goes back to a peace agreement signed on March 23 in 2009, which provided for the integration of the rebels into the Congolese army. The M23 accused the government of not implementing the agreement. At the end of 2021, the rebel group began killing civilians and conquering entire regions. According to the report, M23 militants raped women trying to till their family fields in rebel-controlled areas. The fighters accused the civilians of spying for the Congolese armed forces, the report said. They were often imprisoned and some killed by the rebels. The population under the control of the M23 is not only mistreated, but also has to pay taxes to the rebels, according to the experts. At the Bunagana border crossing with Uganda, the fighters earned an average $27,000 a month by charging people who were transporting goods to enter and leave the country. The M23 did not respond to questions about the allegations, but has in the past described them as propaganda. According to the UN experts, the rebels' violence is part of a general worsening of the crisis in eastern Congo. Fighting escalated in North Kivu and Ituri provinces, the report said. In addition, attacks by the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, believed to be linked to the Islamic State group, have increased. A nearly year-long joint operation by the Ugandan and Congolese armies failed to defeat or significantly weaken the ADF, the report said. Israel's new government also wants to promote settlement expansion in the areas that the Palestinians claim for a future state. The Jewish people have a sole and inalienable right to all parts of the land of Israel, according to the guidelines published by the right-wing religious coalition. The government will promote and develop the settlement of all parts of Israel, in the Galilee, in the Negev Desert and the Golan Heights, and in the Judea and Samaria, that's the West Bank. The Golan Heights, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem are among the areas that Israel captured in the 1967 Six-Day War. The Palestinians want to set up their own state in the Gaza Strip, which has since been vacated by Israel, and the West Bank, with East Jerusalem as the capital. However, the area is now home to more than 600,000 Israeli settlers in more than 200 settlements. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government is scheduled to be sworn in on Thursday in Parliament in Jerusalem. It is the most right-wing government Israel has ever had. According to the guidelines, the government will ensure security in the country and resolutely fight violence and terror. They will also continue the fight against Iran's nuclear program. The government will work to promote peace with all neighbors while safeguarding Israel's security, historical and national interests, it said. The aim is also an appropriate balance in the separation of powers. In education, the Jewish identity should be strengthened. At the same time, they will work for the equality of all population groups in the education system. The government will uphold the Jewish character of the state and the heritage of Israel, while also respecting the religions and traditions of members of other religions, they say. The status quo that has existed for decades should be preserved in the relationship between state and religion and with regard to the holy places. Syria has announced the shelling of Damascus airport by the Israeli Air Force. 2 Syrian soldiers were killed in the attack on Monday night, and the airport was initially out of service due to the attack. That's what the Syrian state news agency Sana reported. The attack took place around 2 a.m. local time. The Israeli enemy carried out an airstrike with a barrage of rockets that hit Damascus International Airport and its environs, Sana said. 2 Syrian soldiers were killed and 2 others injured. Since the war in Syria began in 2011, Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in the neighboring country. The attacks target positions of the Syrian army, pro-Iranian forces, and the Islamist Hezbollah, which is allied with Iran. Israel rarely comments specifically on the attacks. However, Israel has repeatedly emphasized that it will not allow Iran to extend its influence to Israel's borders. The peace process in the Tigray region is progressing slowly. The Ethiopian Federal Police said they came to the capital of the Tigray region as part of a peace agreement. Police officers were in Mekele on Thursday for the first time in more than a year, they said. The police let it be known on Facebook that their members would protect airports, power and telecommunications facilities, and banks. State media photos showed hundreds of police officers coming to Mekele in convoys. Despite the peace agreement, there are reports of brutal violence in this region. The peace agreement was signed between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray forces in November. This ended the conflict between the two camps that broke out in November 2020. According to United States estimates, at least 600,000 people were killed in the war, and millions of people have been displaced. A delegation from the African Union and the Ethiopian government arrived in Mekele on Thursday to set up a mission to oversee the implementation of the peace agreement. The monitoring team is said to be led by 3 African military generals and should have been in Mekele for weeks. Aid workers report that troops from neighboring Eritrea are still present in several locations in Tigray. The peace agreement had provided for their immediate withdrawal. Instead, residents reported looting and acts of violence by the soldiers. In the north of the Ethiopian region of Tigray, however, humanitarian aid deliveries are gradually being made again. The cities of Adirke and Chiko, Maizebri and Rama were reconnected to the electricity grid after more than a year and a half of interruption. Ethiopia's largest airline, Ethiopian Airlines, has been offering scheduled flights to the Tigray region again since Wednesday. The state-owned Ethiopian telecommunications provider Ethio Telecom also resumed its services in Tigray on Wednesday. According to the Prime Minister's office, 28 cities in the region have been reconnected to the telephone network. For 2 years, the region was largely cut off from the rest of the world. The Ethiopian government shut down telecommunications, banking, electricity, and air transport in Tigray after the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, held regional elections in the northern part of the region, despite a ban from Addis Ababa. According to the United Nations, several 100,000 people have died in the fight since November 2020. According to the authorities, at least 60 people have been killed in violent clashes in South Sudan, including many women and children. After an attack by several hundred fighters from a youth militia, around 20 other people in the greater Pibor administrative area in the state of Jonglei have been injured since Sunday, said a regional parliament spokesman to the German press agency. The clashes, therefore, continued. Several villages around the town of Pibor were set on fire and looted. Residents were kidnapped and cattle were stolen, the spokesman said. The attackers were armed with machine guns. The governorate's information minister, Abraham Kelangiji, called the attack barbaric. Dozens of people fled their villages and spent Christmas holidays without food and hiding in the bushes. In the East African country, there have been outbreaks of violence in the state of Jonglei and Upper Nile for weeks. According to the United Nations, more than 9,100 people have fled the recent escalations. The Intergovernmental Authority for Development, or IGAD, in East Africa even speaks of 50,000 refugees since mid-November. South Sudan, which has been independent since 2011, has been led by a fragile transitional government led by President Salva Kiir Mayardit and former rebel leader Riek Machar for a good 2 years. In 2013, a civil war broke out in the oil-rich and conflict-ridden country, killing thousands and fleeing millions. Despite a peace agreement 5 years ago, various armed groups continue to fight for influence there. And this concludes this week's report on African and Arabic politics. But tomorrow will be another one on another topic. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.